Alrighty. Thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. I'm Miles, the outreach manager for AED at the department level. Really excited to open up this conversation in this webinar. To all of our guests, you will be muted throughout the presentation, and then afterwards we'll have a quick Q&A. I will go ahead and send this over to Brent to introduce our new guests.
Great, thanks, Miles. Yeah, we're really pleased today to have this really interesting topic about pollinator habitat, and specifically focused on universities and what universities potentially can do. And we're doubly excited today to have with us an expert in pollinator habitat. Mary Gardner is with us from the Department of Entomology, who'll give a brief introduction about just the importance of sort of pollinators in our ecosystems and to us as humans as well. And then we'll turn it over to Wu Yang, Dr. Wu Yang Hu, from the Department of Ag, Environmental and Development Economics to walk through the study he did. So without further ado, Mary, thanks a lot for joining us, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here to give a little bit of a short introduction about the value and importance of bees before we get started with the main webinar. I'm going to share the screen, hopefully. It's always... So that's the wrong screen. Oh, no. Okay, so you can see my PowerPoints.
Yep.
Okay. And I'm now sharing swap displays. There we go. So now it's the full screen? No.
It's not actually, it's the
presenter. Okay. Yeah. Let me try that again. Sorry.
It was actually on there before.
It was right the first time. Okay. It's never
it's the most
okay, now it should be good then.
Yep.
Okay, very good. I feel like 2 years in, I still can't get it right, folks. So it's a pleasure to be here to tell you a little bit about the importance of bees on campus. So bees are pollinators. I think most people recognize the value that we get from bees as pollinators, but both male and female bees, they feed on flowers. And so they're going to flowers to collect nectar, but it's the females that also collect pollen. And with that nectar, and when they move flower to flower, they accidentally leave pollen in between flowers, cross-pollinating plants. So they're not really doing that, as little workers helping us. They're just naturally collecting their food, and in doing so, they're providing pollination. And you can see why they're so good at it. These two bees have pollen collecting hairs absolutely covered with pollen grains. Pollination is important. There's over 352,000 species of flowering plants, and about 87% of those are pollinated by some kind of animal. So bee pollination and insect pollination in general is critical in maintaining fragile habitats. There are many rare plants that might have one specialist pollinator that pollinates it. Also, from our standpoint, 1 in 3 bites of our food requires animal pollination. About 75% of crops produced require animal pollination, and that's about 1,500 species of crops. Economically, this is really important. Estimates have put the value of pollination at $361 billion across the world, and about $30 billion in the US alone, and that was quite a number of years ago at this point. So one thing that I like to show people is what produce looks like with bees versus without bees. So this is a Whole Foods. With bees, you can see we have access to all sorts of fruits and vegetables, and without bees, it quickly diminishes what we would have access to. And so our diets would be considerably different without the work of bees. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is just how many species of bees we have in Ohio. People think about biodiversity in tropical environments or fragile habitats, but across our state alone, we have about 400 species of bees, which is pretty amazing. And these bees range a lot in how they live their lives. So we have some species of social bees. Social bees are insects that live in colonies and groups where they work together to provision a nest and take care of it. So usually in these systems, there's one queen that's laying the eggs, and then there are workers who are doing things like constructing the nest, feeding the offspring, going to collect food, defending the nest, things like that. And there are a few different species of bumblebees here in this state. We have 8 to 12 maybe about of different species of bumblebees. And also the European honeybee is a bee, of course, that lives in colonies. But beyond those species, the majority of that 400 species are solitary bees. And these are species that people don't really think about when they think about pollinators as quickly as some of the more common honeybees or bumblebees. Solitary bees are insects where each female provisions her own nest without the help of others. And so a female bee will provision a nest. In this example, it's a soil nesting bee. She digs a burrow, puts pollen and nectar in this little ball inside the burrow, and then lays an egg on it. That larva develops by eating that food, pupates, and then the next generation emerges. We already have some soil nesting solitary bees out and about now, and different species will be out throughout the growing season. Typically, this life cycle takes a year in Ohio species, and so you only see the adult for a few weeks, but this whole life cycle is always going on in our environment, something to think about from a conservation standpoint. Solitary bees make their living in all sorts of different ways. Some nest in cavities, like little stems or pithy stems or crooks in bark, or even cavities that we provide. Some nest in soil, and this is an example of a soil nest. Some nest in wood like carpenter bees. So they use a lot of different components of the environment to make their nests and reproduce. And so unfortunately, these resources that bees need are threatened. And this has led to the decline of many bee species. So there's several threats that have affected the abundance and diversity of bees in the environment, things like urbanization, which is a major driver of habitat loss, environmental changes like global warming, changes in precipitation patterns, storm severity, all sorts of things might influence the success of bees in a habitat. If a habitat floods, a soil nesting bee is not going to survive, right, in that local environment. Pesticides are a huge problem. Neonicotinoids, for instance, have been linked to mortality of bumblebees in several different studies. Pathogens are a challenge for bees, and also competition with invasive species, among many other drivers. And so this is challenging, especially because many of these are linked to cities. And so I think the first thing people would ask is, well, is it worth putting together bee habitat on a campus, a bee campus? Because OSU's campus is an urban campus. Well, actually, despite all of the challenges that cities provide, bees have found ways to exist within the urban environment when provided with the right kinds of habitat. And we found of those 400 species, about 100 species have been found in cities, and they occupy things like minimally managed green spaces that have weedy plants, people's gardens, purpose-planted bee habitat, parks, all sorts of different spaces. And sometimes the amount of habitat that they might have access to has to be really concentrated because these things don't disperse miles. I mean, if you think of the OSU campus, it's pretty big. And there are many bee species whose entire life is spent within an area of that size or smaller. And so when we think about how far bees can travel for resources, many are going to be dependent just on campus or on a very small area. Some of the big bees, like a carpenter bee, they might be able to go a couple of miles, but many smaller bees like leaf cutters or sweat bees, they are going more like 400 yards in their total time frame. And then we have some tiny species of sweat bees and others that maybe are only occupying like 200 yards or even less. And so you can see in this picture on the bottom, this giant head is a carpenter bee, and then here's a little tiny bee. So obviously these little ones, they're not going to go as far. So if they can't find the resources they need really locally, that can matter. And I always tell people that, you know, when they have a small patch of a yard like I have, does it really matter? Yes, it can matter for those bees that can't go very far. So what would we want to do here looking forward to provide this kind of habitat? I give hour-long presentations about this, but just really briefly, as we get into our main seminar, things to think about with a bee campus. Providing education and training on how to do this is a great way to have an impact really broadly. For instance, in Columbus, the Community Backyards program is a rebate-based program where people can get native plants for their yard. This is from Franklin County Soil and Water. All these little purple dots are places where people have read about this program, learned why native plants are important, and gotten that rebate and planted native plants. And look at the amount of habitat that's created in backyards across our city. And here's an example of just one yard. So when you provide training and opportunity, people are interested in doing this. Another thing to note is the importance of avoiding applying pesticides, or for sure, like making sure they're applied properly when necessary. Looking at providing things like season-long flowers, nesting materials, like I talked about, all these different nesting types that bees have, protecting those nesting sites, providing overwintering habitat and water sources are all components of creating a bee campus that can really turn the needle, can make a difference for bees here in the city of Columbus. And we would be adding habitat to a city where people are already really interested in this based on the Community Backyards program and other outreach programs. So I think it's a great time for Ohio State to engage more in these activities. So thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Wu Hang, who's going to present his seminar. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mary, so much for a great, fantastic introduction. You actually have done a much better job than I could in terms of the background, but I will continue with your talk, basically. So folks, hopefully you can see my screen. Right, great, thank you. Gonna activate the seminar mode. Before I start, I really want to thank my co-author, Dr. Jared Pan from Louisiana State University, and also here, if I can get this. As you will see, this study is done on 3 campuses, including LSU, Louisiana State. So that's why we have the co-authorship and people, we joined to work on this. And one more thing I want to point out is Jared's wife is an entomologist. So I learned a lot from her as well. Really, it's a teamwork. The conversation starts from the conservation effort. We hear the megafauna a lot more, like whales and pandas and foxes and little animals and mammals and rabbits and all that kind of deal, even ancient extincted animals. But we rarely talk about insects. Are they unattractive? Are they just not important? Obviously not, right? We have heard from Mary about the real importance of the insects. But the problem is major decline in their population. I've shown 2 pictures here, monarch butterfly, and this is called the rusty-patched bumblebee. They're both endangered. Mary talked a lot about the background, about the decreased forage, pollution, urbanization, climate change, all that kind of issues contribute to the decline of insects, and particularly some of the more of a kind of a signature insect that we hear more often in the news or radios. But the point is, should universities be involved in conservation, and particularly about insect conservation? There are several organizations, in fact, many organizations offer such programs that universities or public entities or even private organizations can sign on, including the Xerces Society, the Bee Campus USA. There are other campus pollinator conservation programs. I listed one of them. There are many. The question is, should we engage into those? Now, I want to zoom in to the Bee Campus USA certification. It's offered by the Xerces Society. As you can see, this is the logo here, Bee Campus USA kind of logo. And the certification started in 2015, quite a number of years ago. So far, about 120 campuses signed on, like essentially got certified based on this principle. There are a couple requirements in terms of what the campus should be doing to be able to earn that certification. Mary mentioned some of this, or in fact, many of these different aspects already. So I'm not going to repeat. Essentially, if you quickly scan through this items I listed here are very manageable by any campuses, right? Put up some signs, put some more education effort out there, having classes have a service learning component of your courses, all that are very manageable to do. However, the conservation idea or conservation bees, are they really that important? We see no obvious benefits, but we see a lot of costs. When I say we, I mean some people, some folks will argue that we don't see any real benefits, which to a certain degree, I agree, because it's hard to see, right? Why do we conserve the bees? Mary mentioned a lot of reasons. I think for after today, a lot of folks will think this differently, potentially, right? Think about that grocery store shelf. Without bees, all those things will be gone, potentially. So it's really fundamentally important question. Now, if we want to zoom into the kind of a reasoning argument of pollinator and pollination, there are some of the important messages here. Mary mentioned the like fruit production. I'm not going to repeat. They offer ecological services. The pollination is important, but some reasons for pollinators to exist is like this, right? They deserve to be there. They deserve for our future generation to see them. Think about some of the rare animals. We probably never have a chance to see them in our life. They're remotely located, they're isolated, but we would like them to be there for us in the future to see potentially, and also for our children to enjoy them. So when we talk about values, benefits, we can't only look at the existing values as tangible values, right? For one fruit being produced out of the service of a honeybee, sure, that's one part of the benefits, but also need to look at some intangible future benefits as well. So as an economist, we want to do a kind of a consideration of the costs and benefits, not only the tangible ones, but also the intangible ones. And in fact, in the economic discipline, we call the third point here, we call them a option value, or we call them a future option value. So these are all the tangible or intangible sides of the benefits. But the problem is this: we want to do a cost-benefit analysis. We need to make sure that the costs and benefits are limited in a way. Why do I put out this sentence here up front? Well, that is because some folks would agree that some of the benefits or costs cannot be measured by money. For example, a person's life. Some folks will argue that a person's life is priceless. It cannot be measured by a dollar value. But here, we're not trying to make an argument of whether or not something should or should not be measured by a dollar value. But if we assume that the benefits or costs are limited, broadly defined, limited in a way, then we can indeed look at the dollar values for the cost and benefit and compare, see whether something is worthwhile to do, something is, look at the overall value of certain things minus the cost. So broadly defined, we are going to discuss whether we should engage in conservation in general, but more sort of naturally defined is bee campus program. Can OSU or any campus engage in bee campus effort, can contribute their part to conservation, and specifically in our case study right here about bee conservation. Here I want to make a kind of another argument saying, I strongly agree with Mary's information presentation, and a lot of folks don't realize the bees are, there are many different varieties of bees, right? Not just a single one variety honeybee. And if you notice that when Mary said honeybees, she said European honeybees. And in fact, those common honeybees we see buzzing all over the time, all that buzzing, they're not native to North America at all. They're kind of a different species from Europe, right? Just think about different aspects of bees. It's much more complex, much more, I would argue, interesting than just a single variety just buzzing through that bee. So many aspects of bees, and can we preserve that special species, like multiple species, to benefit not only us, but the environment, but our future generation, right? So here we want to set up a cost-benefit analysis, and hopefully we can set up this particular example for future use, not only for OSU, but for all other campuses, and not only for campuses, but also for public, private institutions, and also beyond this organizations, maybe private homes. Unfortunately, not a whole lot of work has been done on the cost-benefit cost analysis on pollinators for some of the reasons I mentioned before. But we, as economists, we can help. We're going to start from examining the benefits, dollar value, the cost, dollar value of getting certified as B Campus USA. But the problem is we don't have certification yet, right? For OSU, take OSU as example. OSU doesn't have a B Campus certification status yet. And how do we find out the cost and benefit before we even do it, right? So that's how we're kind of helping as economists get into the stories, try to provide our advices. So method in general, we want to know the what ifs, right? We want to collect enough information from the audience, and we want to know how would people do if something would occur. For example, would our consumers take a different variety of a food product? Would they take a new cell phone offer if the cell phone is being created? So here, the same idea. Think about, we're going to ask our audience, think about the B Campus certification. How much would you support it if we were to go about to get it? So we're going to ask the what if situation. And we say, as economists, we call this a stated preference kind of approach or scenario. We ask our audience to state what they would do in this situation, instead of showing exactly what they have done and collect the information afterward. So that's not what we're approaching this. We're approaching this before things have occurred. Right. We also recognize that information in the process is important, because we're going to describe something that is not in reality, at least in OSU reality. We don't have the certification yet. We want to understand how people envision, how people would prefer, and their attitude towards the B Campus certification. For benefits, we're going to estimate, assess how much students are willing to allow a fee increase, their student fee increase, to get B Campus certification. So we use this fee increase as our benefit measure. For cost measure, we're going to calculate the estimated cost of implementing the requirements that OSU needs to obtain B Campus certification. So again, the benefits is from student support in terms of allow the increase of student fees to support to get this certification. The cost is actual cost or estimated cost of implementing the practices that are being required by B Campus USA certification. A summary of what we do, we're going to get the economic values of pollinator conservation through the B Campus certification. We're going to present the cost-benefit analysis result. Here, you will notice me switching between cost-benefit. I've done this already. Cost-benefit and benefit-cost, they mean the same thing. Of course, if you dig in the literature, you're going to find some people define this as very different approaches. But in today's conversation, I'm going to treat these two concepts, cost-benefit, benefit-cost, being the same. So we're going to evaluate how information, specifically reminders of student fees, existing student fees, how that reminder may affect student willingness to kind of contribute to a B Campus certification program. We're going to assess our research in 3 campuses: OSU, Louisiana State University, and University of Kentucky. You may ask, why these 3 schools? Well, North, Central, and South in a way, right? In a way. But also another important information is I'm at OSU. My collaborator, Jared Penn, is at LSU, and we both were at the University of Kentucky before. So we know, we have our connections, we know the campus well, so we can actually pull this off, trying to do a good job knowing the institutional background of 3 campuses. We're going to do a survey to estimate the benefit, and we're going to do interviews to assess the cost. And then we're going to do a cost benefit overall assessment. Some disclaimer, we're trying to present the facts. We're not here to judge whether things should or should not occur. And we're trying to present conservative measures. By conservative measures, we're going to do a smallest possible calculation of the benefits, but we're going to do a largest possible cost calculation. So then we're not going to, so essentially we're going to be underestimating potentially the benefits, but potentially overestimating the cost. Try to make a conservative prediction in terms of cost benefit analysis. I'll try my best to avoid people getting upset, heartbreaking, and then defriend or unfriend me. So that's my goal. All right. So benefit, we did a survey. Here's our questionnaire. We have 5 sections. We ease people in by asking a grocery shopping habit kind of a question. They answer a couple questions about how much you shop and how much money you spend on grocery, things like that. And the second section, we ask pollinator knowledge and attitude. For example, do you know that honeybees are not native to the North America? And third component, we ask the bee campus certification kind of question. We describe the information, we present additional information, and we do our evaluation or valuation of the benefits. And then after that section, the 4th section, we ask folks' knowledge and attitudes towards more broadly defined sustainability initiatives. And then we conclude the survey with the demographic information. Right, so let's look at the survey question we used in terms of getting the benefits. The text under the Ohio color, I don't think those are scarlet color, but anyhow, under the red quotation is the text, is the original words used in the survey. So we asked who university why here, that why, we changed that across 3 campuses, right? Before, our study is about 3 campuses, so we changed between OSU, LSU, and UKY. So we introduced the information, and we also let the students know or the respondents know that to be certified as a B campus, the campus needs to satisfy 5 criteria. The 5 criteria here, I did not put them under the right quotation. It's because these are not the original words we used in the survey. But if I put the original words, it could be too crowded for a presentation. So essentially, those 5 criteria are listed below. As you can see quickly, that having a IPM, right here, IPM, having an IPM plan, that's more challenging and more complex. But some of the other efforts are not really that costly. For example, sponsor service learning and having some awareness events, have some courses and post signage, those are manageable to do in terms of cost. So I would argue here, it's my personal opinion, I would argue that to have the to satisfy the 5 criteria, it's not going to take a whole lot of sort of a new efforts in a way. Right? So but I'll come back to this parts later on. Continue our survey question. We ask the respondents, suppose a vote is going to take place in the fall. And we did this study in 2018. You may ask, why is it so old? Why your data is so old? 2018, we don't need that old data. Our intention was to repeat this kind of research every 2 years. And unfortunately, 2020, everybody knows what happened in 2020 and after, so we couldn't really continue the effort. But I think presenting a sort of most up-to-date information, although it's kind of, a couple years back in the years, but I think that's still useful. And we're interested in advancing, changing, modifying, adopting this study in the future effort to continue our research endeavor, right? So we asked the respondents for a one-time fee. Okay, I highlight this one-time. For one-time fee, would you be willing to let the university charge you some extra dollars, some extra amount, so that so that the university can actually have resources to put in, I'll go back to the slide before, to put in the efforts here to encourage a B campus and to get certified at B campus. So this dollar values here, when respondents see this in the survey, this dollar value is going to vary across 5, 10, or 20. So it's randomly built into the survey. People see random numbers. Of course, not super random, like 5.5. No, only the 3 values here. And then we're going to ask people the question of, are you willing to, well, I guess I don't have to read. Are you willing to support this, even this case is involving real money? So why do we do this? We're trying to build reality into our survey, right? You can't ask people a question like, would you spend such dollar to do certain things? And people may tend to say, oh yeah, why not? I don't care. This is a survey. I mean, it's nothing can be real. I'm going to say yes, or whatever number you say, or random numbers, sure, whatever, right? We don't want that to happen. So we're careful trying to let people think about the reality. How would they behave? Think hard in a real situation. If the vote really has to take place, what would they do? Not only that, we also offer information. As I mentioned before, doing this kind of survey, the explanation, the context setting is really important. We want people to know the full information that's being involved, making sure they're fully informed so they can make an informed decision. So that's our goal. So we share 4 types of information. I'll go back to the slide before. So here, would you contribute your own money? Keep in mind that. So to follow that information, we have the 4, we call them treatments. So each respondent to our survey is being randomly assigned to one of the 4 treatments. So they're only seeing one of the 4, right? The first information or first treatment is we call it the control. So we only inform students about the mandatory fees they're paying. I think at that time, 2018, LSU charges about $2,000. OSU charges about $900 ish. UK, Kentucky charges about $600-700. So we inform folks, remind them. You would imagine every student would know this number. Sure, once upon a time, they may know this number, but over the years, they may not be aware of this number anymore. So we remind folks the student fee you're paying already. So that's the first treatment. The second treatment is we ask, we give students, our respondents, this is second treatment, the specific number, right? The first control, we only tell them that you're paying a fee. You're already paying a fee. But the second treatment is we tell people the exact number they're paying according to different university, the exact number they're paying. The third treatment is in that treatment, students will see the first control information. They know they're paying a fee, and then they can be reminded that they're paying a specific number of that. So essentially, they're going to take a vote first, only knowing that they're paying a fee. They're paying a fee. And then we tell them the second piece of information, the exact number they're paying, and we ask them to vote again. So the third treatment is kind of a combination of the first 2 treatments. And the fourth treatment is we let them know the mandatory student fees they're paying, but also we let them to know they call the green fee, in short, green fee or sustainability initiative fee they're paying. At the time of study, LSU charges $2. Kentucky charges $4, and OSU charges $0. So we let people know the information and want to see how people behave differently under the information. Here, I probably should go back here a little bit more, like why do we kind of engage into this information treatments? We know that information potentially is important for any survey, but the cost information, the actual dollar value, like the student fee information is particularly important because they could actually go either ways. They could encourage a student to pay more. In the following argument, a student may think that, oh, I'm paying hundreds, even thousands of dollars already as student fee, allowing the university to charge a couple more dollars, right? A couple more dollars of a B campus conservation fee is not a big deal. So I will be able to support that. Past research has shown that if you talk about marginal increase of fees, right, not a brand new different tax or a fee or a massive charge, but just incremental marginal gain or charge on the existing fee or existing payment, people tend to be less concerned about that, right? And also the idea is endorsement effect. Students may know that, oh, we're paying the fees already, we're paying sustainability fees already. That means the university is engaging into this kind of effort already. So additional couple dollars more kind of support, not a big deal. So we have endorsed this kind of activities already, so additional effort wouldn't be too much of a problem. So that's a kind of the plus side. The minus side would be essentially a budget reminder, right? Anybody out there will tell them that you have paid a lot of money already. Be careful paying extra dollars. Say, oh yeah, I've been paying a whole lot of money already. Why should I pay extra? Or I should be extra careful, not paying extra. So the information involving the payment, the current payment, could have two directions in terms of impact on student willingness to engage in B campus certification. So we want to test that information. In terms of the survey we did, we don't want to spend too much time. We designed a questionnaire. We implemented the survey in 2018 on campus, on the 3 campuses, all at the same time. We asked student teams to hold a booth and print a QR code, sort of a sheet. Passerbys can scan the QR code and finish the survey. Altogether, we have about 700-ish people sort of successfully completed the survey, about 200 each from each campus. Now let's talk about the survey result here. Here are just the information about the demographics or the distribution of our sample or characteristic of the sample. We show the overall sample, that's combining all 3 campuses. We also show individual campus, for example, like OSU. Let's look at OSU, our sample characteristics, and the OSU student population characteristics. As you can see, we're slightly, or you can see quite a bit, getting over a representation from students in the College of Agriculture. Well, I think that's a natural consequence of our survey in a way. All our team members are from the College of Agriculture, our students. So naturally, they're going to draw more attention from the same folks from the same college. This table is not my focus, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. As long as you know that we do have, I would argue, not too bad of a representation of the 3 campuses in terms of student population. You can scan through these numbers. And for example, we have more information here, the more intangible information. For example, did you spend more than $500 in terms of tuition out of your pocket, right? As a percentage, that information. And we also asked, how many semesters have you been on this campus? This will help to differentiate the freshmen versus the graduating seniors. As you will see, graduating seniors, we do not include graduating seniors because we know their benefits can be limited in terms of on-campus benefit. So they're going to be potentially underestimating their willingness to support the effort. We have some other attitude questions. Again, these are not the focus of the study. We can just quickly glance through. We asked them, do you think bees should be protected? Are you afraid of bees? And do you protest? What does that mean? Do you protest is some folks may think that a conservation program or effort is not part of my job. Universities should be doing that, should not be asking me to help out. So folks they're not protesting about honeybees. They're protesting about the effort of why a public university is asking me to support, right? So we ask those kind of questions. There is more percentage of folks belonging to the protester category. And finally, if you remember the 4 treatment groups, control group, the fee reminder group, the follow-up, the combined group, and the sustainability fee group, they split. They're relatively equally split in our 4 treatments. Models. In the interest of time, I only have maybe 12 minutes to go, so I'm not going to spend much time talking about the models. So let's look at the result. First, remember we actually randomly assign people to the $5, $10, and $20 kind of a fee, startup that fee kind of a scenario. So if people see $5, if you look at this overall sample, 77% people say yes, saying that in the future, I'm willing to pay $5 more in my fee to the university so the university can engage in B campus certification. If people are randomly assigned to the $10 scenario, only 72% people will say yes to that $10 and $20 even less. So this gives us the information that our survey respondents are sensitive to the price, to the cost of them being involved in terms of supporting. We also calculated this. If you look at the Kentucky example, or sample rather, you will see that we have a extra column called certainty calibration. What does that mean? So when folks answer surveys, again, this is a sort of hypothetical situation, right? Folks are not paying their actual dollars, taking the dollar from their pocket wallet to pay the dollar. No, they're not doing that. They're stating, I would have paid. I would have been doing this. So there is a layer of extra sort of people getting overly optimistic about their willingness to kind of engage in this. So we follow up that yes or no question with a certainty question, basically asking people, are you sure about your decision that you just agreed or disagreed with that, whatever the dollar value we presented there? If people say they're not sure, we're gonna recode those people as no, as a disagreement, right? We ask yes or no question, and we follow up with certainty. And people say, I did say yes, sir, but I wasn't really very sure. For those people, we treat them as if they're a no people or sort of answer. So you can imagine by doing this, we are doing a conservative measure of people's willingness to support the B campus certification. And if we do that, our value is not $11, it's $6 on average for the Kentucky sample. So we're doing this same kind of a adjustment for the other two campuses. So if you divide the $6-ish to the $11-ish, we're going to call this a calibration factor. So essentially, if you naively treat all yes answers as the true yes answers, it's going to be likely 1.8 times bigger than a more conservative measure of the yes answers. So we're going to use this ratio to adjust each of the red numbers here. For example, OSU, we're going to adjust that to $8. We're going to adjust the $14 to $7, that idea. So that here, you can see we have a less conservative measures, the red numbers, or the more conservative measures, the dark numbers here. So that's our sort of a first quick scan of people's answer to yes kind of thing. From their yes answers, we can derive their willingness to help, to contribute to the conservation. That's not enough. We also did a model. We're going to run the analysis. This is a low-J model. We're going to run a model to put all the explanatory factors in that model. For example, their demographic information, their experiences, how much money they're paying out of the pocket in terms of tuition, are they afraid of bees, all that information. And then we calculate the willingness to pay, the willingness to support. Here, I do want to mention the first red box here. As you can see, the rows are labeled as fee and the fee plus sustainability kind of information. Those are our treatments, right? So we see these are all, most of the numbers are positive. These are compared to the control group, where we'll only tell people you're paying a fee, but we didn't tell people how much they're paying a fee, including sustainability fee. So this information here, this red box here, it tells us an important message. That is, if we tell students exactly what number they're paying towards their student fee or sustainability fee, we're likely going to increase their willingness to engage in pollinator conservation or B campus certification. So that's the important message, right? The information here, presenting extra information and the precise number of dollars they're paying as a fee is going to help in terms of helping people engaging into bee conservation. And here are our willingness to pay, the benefits measure based on the model results. Remember the slide before, we just simply show the yes or no answers. From that yes or no answer, we derive the benefits. But here, we derive the benefits from the models. Which one is better? It's hard to say. the yes or no more direct. The models involve more factors, have more uncertainty, like so many factors to consider, but yet the model is more comprehensive in terms of taking into this all this information and controlling all these other variations. So it's hard to tell which one's better, but yet we got these numbers. Same idea. From the Kentucky sort of example, we calculate the certainty calibration factor, which is about 2.4. Quickly reminding folks, what is the certainty calculation? That is, we simply ask people to say yes or no here to derive this $26, this value. But we also ask people, are you sure about your yes decision before? If they say probably yes or maybe, they're going to be recoded as a no answer. So automatically, this number will be lower, the support, right? The partially yes people, halfway yes people are going to be counted as no. So the willingness to pay is lower, so the benefit is lower. By doing this, we're able to obtain a more conservative measure of the benefits. This table summarizes the benefits. LSU, OSU, UK, total student number, undergrad student number. This is based on 2018 enrollment, I think. And we also adjusted our student numbers to a lower number, second row here. Why so? Well, in order to achieve a more conservative measure of the benefits, we removed the fourth year, the graduating students, because we assume that they may have limited number of sort of benefits to them if they pay a fee next year, right? Imagine I'm going to be graduating soon, I pay a fee, I'm not going to benefit from that fee on campus. So necessarily their willingness to support is going to be potentially lower. But let's assume away all of them. Why? We want to do a conservative measure. So we're assuming the graduating student have zero value in B campus. That's of course not true, but that will make our estimation more conservative, right, on the smaller side. So as we said, I want to be conservative. So these are numbers we put up, summarize all these numbers together. They're messy, but overall you can see the numbers are ranging from $5 each to $60, that neighborhood, depending on different campuses and different scenarios and different sort of how conservative we are in terms of arriving at these numbers. Now, enough about the benefits. Again, one more time, the benefits is from students' willingness to pay extra dollar to allow the campuses to engage in B campus certification. So we're getting a benefit from that perspective. What about the cost? As we said, I did a survey, or we did a survey interview of experts on each campus. We called them, we interviewed them, we talked to them in person, we drive through different offices and visit different people. We obtained these numbers. There are 7 criteria that Jersey society requires to obtain B campus certification. Some of the ideas or requirements are in a way easier in terms of cost, at least. So for example, host a awareness event. We estimated that it's going to be annually about $500 for each campus. Now, here's the important message I need to convey, that for each campus, let's say OSU, the reason I'm hesitating, I'm trying to move a bar away so I can see that myself. All right, if you look at OSU, we have the initial, for year 1 or year 0, we label year 0 cost. We also have the annual cost, because we need the initial investment and we also need annual maintenance of the program. So that's why we differentiate the initial and annual based on 4 years. Why 4 years? Typically, a undergrad student time is about 4 years. So that's why we have 4 years time. If you can see that some of the other things are relatively cheaper in terms of cost, sponsor and track student service learning projects, we estimate about this dollars. And why 250 in LSU? Well, that's because we heard from our experts, campus experts, they told us that 250 is good enough. No need to be below 500. The most challenging part is a IPM, the integrated path management. Each campus is very different from the other. OSU, for example, did not or could not come up with a specific itemized effort. It's a joint effort of all native plants and IPMs and pollinator gardens all put together. And we got an initial number, year 1, and we got the annual maintenance cost. For OSU, the cost mostly occur around having a specifically designed personnel, a person coordinator to coordinate the effort. That person's compensation comes a lot to contribute to this amount, to this 60,000 a year amount. Taking LSU as example, LSU is more concerned about weeding, about maintaining the grass and everything, because the southern school, more often in the south, and their annual cost, as you can see, is higher. So this is a lesson learned. We understand that in the future, if ever want to do a cost-benefit analysis across different campuses, we probably should put more effort on the cost side estimation, really knowing exactly which campus is looking for, and getting a good estimate, basically. So putting all this cost estimation together, we come up with a 4-year cost of obtaining B campus certification for each of the campuses we consider. So this is a total 4-year cost. Now, a final step of our analysis is do a cost benefit or benefit cost, right? I kind of switch back and forth analysis. I'll give a quick example of what do I mean by the sort of discounting and future value, present value, all that kind of deal. Let's say in year 1, you get $10, you receive $10. Year 2, you also receive $10. Now, if I ask you, what is the future value of this plan? That is, the future value is, I'm going to receive 10 at the end of year 2, but don't forget, I have received $10 from year 1. By the time of second year, that's already last year. That's going to accumulate some interest. If I assume the interest is about 10%, then the future value of this plan is $21. But the present value, if you convert everything to this year, this $10 you're going to receive in year 2 in the future can be discounted because it's not going to worth $10 this year because you're going to get the money earlier. It's going to only worth $9.10. So the present value is here, converting all future values to the present, and the future value is converting all present values all to the future. So we're going to look at the present value. We're going to look at the present value. So this is what we did. This is summarizing all the cost and benefit. We're switching gear in a way. We're not looking at annual or lump sum investment in year 1. We're putting everything into this year. Remember this year being 2018, not 2023, right? Well, it's based on 2018 dollar. So as you can see, the net present value here, NPV, for each campus, right? You can look at this. Some of the numbers are in the black, some of them in the red. We can see that the first two rows, we call them Turnbull estimates. The difference between Turnbull estimates and the logit, here the last 2 rows are logit estimates. Turnbulls are much more conservative, generate smaller values in terms of the benefits. And Turnbull is the method I use for using the simple yes or no answer kind of deal. Remember that yes or no answer from that table. So overall, if you look at this, I'm not going to get into the detailed specific numbers, but overall, if you look at this, because I want to save some time at the end, look at the numbers. Many numbers are negative, but overall, the negative numbers appear for the most conservative estimates. Remember the certainty calibrated, that's really conservative. And broadly speaking, I would be confident to say that the B campus certification has a broadly defined, a positive net present value. That means it's worthwhile to do. I have 2 more slides, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to dive into those 2 slides. Essentially, we're summarizing the results as being a conservative measure, we're still generating positive net present values. And the future of this research, we can apply to different areas and different schools and different topics even. So with that, I want to wrap up my talk and give the time to the floor for questions. Thank you so much for your attention.
Great. Thanks, Wu Yang, and thanks, Mary, earlier for your comments. unfortunately, we can't have people clapping, so you'll have to just take it from me, the people out there clapping. So appreciate that. We have a few questions here, Yang. I'd like to get to a couple of them really have to do with the surveys themselves, right? You use the survey technique here to sort of estimate these benefits. So the first question was, did you ask if students who are paying, if they're paying student loans, parents, who's paying, in other words, like who are the paying people here, right? Did you sort of try to figure that out?
Yes, not exactly to answer perfectly that question, but we did have a question here, expense. We worry that if students are not paying their own tuition, right, they're getting a scholarship, covering their student fees, they're going to be caring less about paying extra. So we have a variable here controlling those people who are paying at least $500 out of their pockets in terms of paying tuition. So that variable is fairly significant in a way. So we're semi-confident to say that people paying their money or not going to make a difference in terms of willingness to support a B campus effort.
Perfect. Yeah, no, thanks for that. I was going to go to the third question from Amanda, because I think it could draw in Mary as well. But this idea that beyond the benefit of just pollination, has B campus certification has a positive impact on student or faculty mental health or overall satisfaction. I mean, do you know anything about these activities on other campuses that have become B campuses? Has there been any research on that you know about, and any of the sort of broader benefits?
From my perspective, I don't have evidence, cold hard evidence numbers to show the mental benefit of this, but based on my limited understanding, I'll let Mary probably answer more of this question. I'll say that people definitely reflect that being, have a better mood, have a better sort of a appreciation of the ambiance, the environment of the campus.
I also don't know of any specific studies, but I know, for instance, at Michigan State University, to maintain their B campus, they hold annual outreach events that are really well attended, especially by people bringing their kids. And so I think you can't underestimate the educational value as an ecosystem service that something like this can provide for young people.
And also want to add that some folks will come to campus, they look at the picture displayed here, the campus, oh, it's like grassy, just like the campus kind of deserted. But the moment they know this is a pollinator garden, everybody, oh, I see that. People feel much better already, knowing that this is intentionally kept this way, kind of look a little grassy in a way.
Why do you think the benefits are so much bigger at OSU than at the other two campuses? The surprising thing to me there is that those other two campuses are further south. And I guess just being, I don't know anything, well, I know a little bit about this, but not much, but things grow more down there. They'd have a longer growing season. So wouldn't the students be getting a bigger benefit at those other universities because they're exposed or able to see the pollinator habitat, and the bees, I assume, have a longer life? I have no idea, Mary. Do bees live longer in the south than in the north? No.
That's an awesome question. At least one, I don't know the real answer for that, but my suspicion is because OSU folks will see less opportunities outside the campus. So they want to value that, oh, we're being the pioneer of OSU camp to do this. So they start to value this more. So that's my understanding or argument. And for people in LSU, they see bees all over the place. It's naturally grown. Everything is a pollinator kind of habitat. Well, not everything, but sort of untouched, human untouched areas. It's much easier. So that's their value might be lower. I would argue that potentially is one of the reasons.
You have thoughts on that, Mary?
Well, is the campus the same size land area? Because I would think we have a bigger land area.
And we have a bigger student population in a way. And these numbers are per person, by the way, but still, could that be a factor? Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so you're thinking that maybe being an urban campus here, the fact that there's less consistent habitat nearby here potentially, especially I think relative to LSU. I think UK maybe is a little urban too, but not maybe as big of an urban.
UK is urban, very much urban indeed.
Yeah. So there's some, maybe people are sort of responding in part to the lack of habitat in the area here and saying, wow, this actually really is important here.
True. Even UK is an urban habitat, but yet it's much smaller town and easier to get out of the city in a way. But OSU is located essentially right in the center of the city. It's going to be hard to see a lot on a daily basis of pollinators, that, impact.
Okay, so we are out of time. One quick question, sort of a lightning question for both of you. The numbers are positive. I mean, the net numbers might be negative in some circumstances, depending on the cost estimate and depending on the benefit estimate you use, but there's a value, a positive value to bees and to pollinator habitat. What's your prediction on the next decade? Are we gonna have more pollinator habitat at any of these campuses and within urban areas? Are we moving that direction, or are we gonna go the other direction? What do you think? Wu Yang, you say yes?
I would definitely say yes.
Mary?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of momentum for greening across the country now. And I think there's a lot of recognition by both scientists and the public of, you know, the time is now to do this. We know that there's a lot of species in jeopardy. We know that some of those species use urban areas. And so it's critical that we start to take action now to provide these forms of habitat. And it doesn't, it's, as we saw, you know, the costs are not insurmountable. These are things that we can do as a community. So yeah, I see a lot of interest and a lot of growth in this area.
Yeah, you know, that surprised me, actually, the cost. I feel like these costs seem a lot lower than I would have expected. And that to me is encouraging, right? When you add that to the fact that students, I mean, they don't have a lot of money, you know, so they're valuing it pretty significantly. So the rest of us probably have higher values given our incomes are generally higher.
Yes, one thing, Brent, sorry to cut you short. One thing is we did not include the grad students or faculty staff in this study. So they're going to generate another huge amount of benefits estimate. So again, this study is underestimating potentially the benefits.
Right, right. Good point. Good point. Well, we'll have to leave it at that. I can't thank both of you enough for joining us today. Super interesting stuff. I learned a lot, both sides about pollinators, pollinator habitat, but also about how we might go about valuing these things and sort of doing this kind of analysis. And I'm really happy to see that it's positive. I think that's really an awesome thing. So, I mean, the positive net benefits in most cases. So thanks to both of you for joining us. Thanks for the audience for coming on. This will be recorded for the future. Do want to let everybody know that we've got another webinar in a couple weeks, the first part of May. I'll give you the exact date if I can get my calendar open here, but that one will be on energy. It'll be May 3rd at 12 o'clock. That'll be on energy, and that'll be me giving that presentation. So we'll look forward to seeing those of you who want to see something about energy at that time. But in the meantime, have a great day. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, see you guys. Thanks.
Thank you.